3 years ago, I stood in the corner of my own funeral, watching the two obsessive sisters who drove me to this cry, their pretty eyes out. The older one, her face a cold mask, stared into the distance with hollow eyes, as if her soul had been ripped out. The younger one knelt on the floor, stroking my memorial portrait over and over. She whispered, "Darling, even in death, you're not getting away from us." I smirked, wiped away a single, ridiculous tear, and walked out to catch a flight to London. So long, farewell. See you never. It was the beginning of my freedom. I never imagined that 3 years later, they'd corner me on a crowded London street. They smiled, and one of them said, "Leo Vance. I thought you're dead." 01 at my funeral, a mournful string quartet played softly in the background. I, Leo Vance, hid in the shadows, watching Victoria and Scarlett Ashford, the sisters who had personally driven me to my death, put on a heartbreaking performance. Victoria, the older sister, stood motionless in a severe black dress. Her face was a blank slate, but the knuckles of her clenched fists were bone white, betraying the collapse happening within. Scarlett, the younger, was a complete wreck. She had sunk to her knees, her hands caressing the cold glass of my memorial portrait, a desperate mantra spilling from her lips. "Leo, you're ours. Forever." Her voice was raw, and the madness glittering in her eyes sent a chill down my spine. I fought back a bitter laugh and discreetly wiped a tear from my own eye. It was a tear born half of the sheer absurdity of it all, and half of the overwhelming relief of finally breaking free. I glanced at the black and white photo of myself in the center of the lavishly decorated hall. The guy in the picture was so handsome, even I was a little jealous. On either side of it, my Oscar-worthy parents were giving the performances of their lives, wailing and gnashing their teeth as if their world had ended. They were good, so good. If I didn't know they were my accomplices, I almost would have believed them. I'm what you might call a run-of-the-mill reincarnator. One moment I was, well, somewhere else. The next, I opened my eyes as a screaming infant, reborn with my memories intact. I had grand ambitions. This time around, I'd be the genius wunderkind who ruled the school. I'd be the corporate shark with the emotional intelligence to dominate the boardroom. Eventually, I'd become a titan of industry, take over as CEO, marry a supermodel, and achieve the American dream on steroids. Then I discovered my dad was the chairman of Vance Holdings, and my mom wasn't exactly a slacker herself. I tried to count the zeros on our family's net worth statement and gave up after the third attempt. That's when it hit me. I was already born at the finish line. Why the hell would I bother running the race? A genius? A genius still has to work for someone. I was now the guy countless geniuses would work for. So I made a conscious decision to embrace the slacker life. As for the supermodel, I'd had two of them practically gift-wrapped since birth. The Ashford sisters, childhood friends, our families were equals, and both were breathtakingly beautiful. What could be easier than picking one? I naively assumed it was like shooting fish in a barrel. I doted on them, showered them with affection, a perfect gentleman. But slowly, things started to go wrong. The way they looked at me grew more intense, more possessive, more unhealthy. It all finally imploded on the night our parents finalized the engagement between me and Victoria, the older sister. Scarlett, the fiery, impulsive one, kidnapped me that very night. When I woke up, her eyes were burning with a terrifying light as she whispered in my ear, "You want to marry my sister? First, you're going to be mine." And then, I was eventually rescued by Victoria, who had somehow gotten wind of the situation. I thought I was safe, but the look she gave me was even colder than the basement I just left. Before I could even try to explain, she locked me in an even deeper, more secure cellar. As she tore my clothes, her voice was like ice. "Don't worry, I'll erase every trace of her." And so again, somehow, by exploiting their jealousy and rivalry, I managed to create an opportunity to escape. I immediately went to my parents and told them everything. I was calling off the wedding. I was getting out. A perfect plan to fake my own death formed in my mind instantly. I laid it all out for my parents. Understanding my torment, they agreed to help me stage the whole production. Which brings us to today's grand funeral. Watching them suffer over my death, I felt not a shred of guilt, only a twisted, satisfying sense of vengeance. You brought this on yourselves. After the service, as the guests departed, I put on a baseball cap and a face mask, pulled the brim down low, and slipped out of the funeral home, heading straight for JFK. A push notification lit up my phone. Ashford's sisters vow lifelong celibacy to honor their beloved childhood friend. Heh, classic them. As the plane took off, I watched the city shrink below, deleting every contact from my phone. Goodbye, my beautiful cage, I thought. Hello, freedom. Before switching my phone to airplane mode, I took one last look at a photo of them from a recent product launch. They stared at the camera, their eyes still vacant, completely disconnected. I scoffed and shut the screen off. You want to find me? Good luck. I'm off to London to hide out with my aunt. See you around? Nope, never again. 3 years flew by in a blur of blissful peace. My life in London was idyllic. I owed it all to my legendary aunt, Miranda Shaw. My aunt was my mother's adopted sister, a self-made woman who had moved to the UK decades ago and built a business empire from scratch. She was sharp, ruthless, and incredibly well-connected. When I showed up on her doorstep, she took me in without a second thought. I became a consultant at her company, a ghost position that paid handsomely for doing absolutely nothing. My only real job was to be a playmate for her adopted daughter, Tilly. Tilly was an adorable, doll-like little girl whom my aunt was grooming to be her successor. But kids will be kids, and all she really wanted to do was play. Since my aunt was always busy, I became her designated playmate. Because most of our games revolved around some version of daddy and daughter, she latched onto the name. Before I knew it, every other word out of her mouth was daddy. Daddy, can we go fly a kite in the park today? Daddy, I want you to make your strawberry shortcake. I'd always try to correct her. Call me Uncle Leo, or just Leo is fine. But secretly, I loved the feeling of being so completely and unconditionally adored. Who could say no to such a sweet kid? Eventually, I gave up trying to correct her. When it was just us, I let her call me whatever she wanted. My days were spent parenting, walking the dog, and baking. My evenings were spent on the balcony with my aunt, sipping wine under the stars and talking about life. This was the slacker paradise I had always dreamed of. I'd almost completely forgotten the faces of those two women back in the States. I felt like I had truly been reborn. Occasionally, my aunt would lean back in her lounge chair, swirling a glass of Bordeaux, and tease me with a wry smile. Aren't you worried those two little psychos will track you down? I'd wave a dismissive hand, full of confidence. Not a chance. They think I'm 6 feet under. The grass on my grave is probably knee-high by now. Besides, I'd add, clearing my throat and slipping into a horribly affected, posh British accent. Even if they did, it wouldn't matter. I'm a British citizen now, you see. My name is Nigel Bottomsworth. They'd never recognize me, or what? To completely sever ties with my past, I'd invented this absurdly silly alter ego. Nigel Bottomsworth. Every time I said it, I felt a little more ridiculous. The terrible accent was the final layer of my defense, practiced to painful perfection. My aunt would burst out laughing, pointing at me and calling me pathetic. I just raised my eyebrows smugly, convinced my plan was foolproof. But I forgot that fate has a cruel sense of humor. It loves to slap you across the face, right, when you're feeling most invincible. It was a normal Saturday. The sun was shining. My aunt suggested a trip to Regent Street to buy Tilly some new clothes. I said yes. London, Regent Street. The intersection was a swirling sea of tourists and shoppers. I was holding Tilly, my attention captured by a limited edition anime figurine in a shop window. Tilly, nestled in my arms, was pointing at a doll shop in the other direction, chattering away in her sweet, high-pitched voice. That's when I heard it. A familiar, yet foreign, American accent. A voice like a needle dipped in ice, pierced through the noise and stabbed me right in the ear. My entire body went rigid. My blood felt like it had frozen in my veins. That voice! Slowly, frame by agonizing frame, I turned my head, and there they were. Two faces etched into my DNA. Victoria Ashford, Scarlett Ashford. They were even more stunning than 3 years ago, having shed the last of their youthful softness for the commanding presence of two queens at the height of their power. One was cold as frost, the other hot as fire. They were standing less than 30 feet away. My first instinct was to run. Now, immediately, grab Tilly and bolt. But my eyes were glued to something beside them. Children. They had 3 children with them. Victoria was holding a little girl with a quiet, serious expression. Scarlet had another little girl, a bundle of energy, perched on her hip, while her other hand held that of a cool-looking little boy. Three perfect, doll-like kids, the oldest of whom couldn't have been more than 2 or 3. My brain shut down. For a full 10 seconds, there was nothing but static. Then, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy crashed over me. They got married. They have their own families and lives now. This is amazing. This is fantastic. Their insane possessiveness has finally been redirected. I'm safe. I'm completely, totally safe. I was so ecstatic I wanted to run over, shake their hands, and offer my sincerest congratulations. Calm down, Leo. Calm down. Now is not the time to blow your cover. I suppressed my elation, adjusted my grip on Tilly, and prepared to melt back into the crowd. But just as I turned, Victoria's icy gaze scanned the crowd and locked onto me with pinpoint accuracy. She exchanged a look with Scarlet. In that instant, I felt like prey that had just been spotted by 2 apex predators. They started walking toward me, their long legs closing the distance with terrifying speed. The click-clack of their heels on the pavement sounded like a death knell. My heart hammered against my ribs. Leo Vance. Victoria's voice was flat, but it cut through the noise with an authority that couldn't be ignored. I thought you were dead. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest, but 3 years of preparation had led to this moment. I instantly shifted into character, plastering a look of utter, professional-grade confusion on my face. I scratched my head, my expression one of pure, innocent bewilderment. Then, in my most atrocious, horribly fake British accent, I stammered. Good day, madam. The name's Bottomsworth. Nigel Bottomsworth. Leo. Vance? A Yank, is he? Afraid you've got the wrong chap, love. I even gave them what I hoped was a harmless, goofy grin. Scarlet studied me for a long moment, her eyes scanning me from head to toe like an X-ray. Finally, she let out a short, sharp laugh. He looks a little like him, but the vibe is way too sleazy. That's not my Leo. With that, she took Victoria's arm, and they turned, leading their children away. I let out a massive sigh of relief. My legs felt like jelly. I nearly collapsed right there on the sidewalk, still holding Tilly. I was saved. My acting skills had actually fooled them. My carefully crafted sleazy vibe had become my shield. Flooded with relief, I clutched Tilly and melted into the crowd, disappearing without a second glance. The crisis had been averted. 0, for even though I'd managed to slip away on Regent Street, I couldn't shake the feeling of a cold draft on the back of my neck. It felt like I was being watched by something unseen. For days, whenever I went out, I felt eyes on me. But every time I'd whip my head around, there was nothing there. Was I just being paranoid? Or had those two actually gotten suspicious? To take my mind off things, I decided to revisit a pleasure from my past life. London was famous for many things, but for me, that meant pop culture. First, with a spirit of academic curiosity, I took a walk through Soho's more colorful streets. The sheer, unapologetic boldness of the place sent me fleeing in less than half an hour. I realized then that I was, at heart, a bit of a prude. Things that were too out in the open just weren't for me. My true sanctuary, I remembered, was with fictional characters. Muttering to myself that 2D was always better, I headed for a massive Comic-Con at the Excel. The convention center was packed, the energy electric. I was surrounded by incredible cosplayers. Black Widow, Wonder Woman, Catwoman. The dormant nerd in me was fully activated. I wandered the floor with my camera, snapping pictures, my guard completely down, totally immersed in this geek paradise. In the shadows of the massive hall, several men in dark suits with earpieces were watching my every move. One of them spoke quietly into his collar mic. Target is in Sector B. Mood is relaxed. Situational awareness is at 0. All units stand by. Prepare to close the net. I was completely oblivious. I had just taken a fantastic picture of an amazing cosplayer dressed as Raiden Shogun from Genshin Impact. Humming happily to myself, I went to find a restroom. After taking care of business, I was washing my hands at the sink, still thinking about the amazing costume work I'd just seen. The moment I pushed open the main door to leave the restroom, I felt a sharp, familiar pain at the base of my neck. My vision instantly went black. That clean, efficient nerve-targeting technique. That damn feeling. It was the same move Scarlett used when she kidnapped me all those years ago. My stomach dropped. My last thought was, it's over. Just before I lost consciousness completely, I smelled a familiar scent, a blend of two distinct, expensive perfumes. One was the cold, woody fragrance Victoria always wore. The other was Scarlett's fiery, floral signature. Then, a voice, icy but trembling with an emotion I couldn't place, whispered right next to my ear. It was Victoria. This time, darling, there's no running away. 05, I woke up to the sound of chirping. I opened my eyes and saw a pink ceiling, from which hung an enormous crystal chandelier. The walls were also pink, covered in cute cartoon decals and lined with shelves overflowing with stuffed animals. I shot upright. This was the Ashford sisters' childhood bedroom, the princess room. I've been here dozens of times when we were kids. But something was wrong. I touched the walls. They were soft, padded. The windows were covered with thick blackout curtains, and I could see the glint of metal bars installed on the outside. There was a faint, almost imperceptible smell of antiseptic in the air. They had turned it into a high-end padded cell, a safe room designed specifically to hold me. I was back. They had dragged me back. A wave of despair washed over me, and I squeezed my eyes shut. Just then, I felt something move under the covers. Something small, soft, and warm. My first thought was that it was one of them, trying to pull one of their old, twisted surprises. A surge of anger burned through me. I reached out, grabbing the moving lump through the thick duvet. The feel was wrong. It was too small, too delicate. I ripped the covers back. 3 small, fluffy heads popped up from under the blanket. 3 pairs of wide, dark eyes that looked unnervingly like mine, stared back at me. 2 little girls and 1 little boy. They were sleepy, their cheeks flushed with warmth. Before I could process what was happening, the little girl whose arm I was still holding rubbed her eyes and asked in a tiny, drowsy voice, "Daddy, what are you doing?" "We're still sleepy." "Daddy." I froze, petrified. It felt like a bomb had just gone off inside my skull. I let go of her arm as if it were on fire and started waving my hands frantically. "Don't call me that. I'm not your daddy." The moment the words left my mouth, all 3 of them spoke in perfect unison. "But Mommy said you're our daddy." The quieter little girl's eyes filled with tears, her lower lip trembling. "All the other kids have a daddy. Don't you want us, Daddy?" The more boisterous girl's face crumpled. "Kids at preschool used to call us names because we didn't have a dad. Are you really going to leave us, too?" I sat there, stunned into silence, watching their faces start to crumble. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Just then, the bedroom door opened silently. Victoria and Scarlett, dressed in matching silk pajamas, walked in side by side. They looked at the scene, me on the bed, surrounded by the 3 children, and a sick, satisfied smile spread across their faces. The same smile I hadn't seen in 3 long years. "You're awake," Victoria said, her voice husky and content. "It seems the children have taken a liking to you." She paused, then delivered the final verdict on my life. "That's right, Leo. They're all yours." Scarlett sauntered over, her smile like that of a beautiful, cruel devil. She tilted my chin up with a cold finger, forcing me to meet her gaze. "Surprised, darling? Didn't see that coming, did you?" she purred. "You were so busy back then, we couldn't possibly let all that effort go to waste. Turns out, you hit the jackpot every single time." 06, I was led downstairs to the living room like a marionette with its strings cut. A trial that was 3 years overdue was about to begin. The jury, of course, consisted of only 2 people. They slapped 2 documents down on a coffee table in front of me. 2 paternity tests that read like a death sentence. The black and white text was irrefutable. Leo Vance shared a 9,999% probability of parentage with subject A, Sophie Vance, subject B, Chloe Vance, and subject C, Caleb Vance. Victoria pointed to the quiet little girl. "Her name is Sophie. She's my daughter." Scarlett wrapped her arms around the twins, lifting her chin proudly. "These 2 are mine. The girl is Chloe, the boy is Caleb." My gaze bounced between the 3 children and the damning reports, my brain turning to scrambled eggs. So those 2 times, just twice, and I was now the father of 3? The odds were more insane than winning the Powerball. Seeing my shell-shocked expression, they finally laid out their terms. Victoria spoke first. "We won't force you to marry us. You obviously hate the idea." Scarlett continued, "And we won't lock you up anymore. We know how much you dislike basements." A tiny flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Then, Victoria's next words snuffed it out completely. "But the children can't grow up without a father." They presented their solution. I was to live in this house with the 3 children. My one and only responsibility would be to act as a full-time, stay-at-home dad. They would move into the villa next door. They would come over every day to see the children and would cover all of our expenses, including mine. This was just a gilded cage. I looked at them, opening my mouth to refuse. But my gaze fell on the 3 children, who were watching me with timid, hopeful eyes. They hid behind their mothers, peeking out at me, their faces filled with a desperate curiosity about the word daddy. My resolve crumbled. That look hit me right where I was most vulnerable. Still, I tried to fight for one last shred of dignity. "I'll stay, but you can't treat me the way you did before." To my shock, Victoria nodded. "Agreed, as long as you don't run." Scarlett immediately chimed in, her smile dangerously sweet. "Of course, if you do try to run again, we wouldn't hesitate to break both of your legs, just to make sure you stay with us, and the children for good." A leopard can't change its spots. As I was wrestling with my decision, the front door swung open. My actor parents, having heard the news, had arrived. They saw me and rushed over, crying, "Leo, my boy." But when Victoria and Scarlett pushed the 3 children in front of them and had them say "Grandma" and "Grandpa," my parents froze. A few minutes later, after the reality of their new grandchildren had sunk in, they were weeping with joy. My mom held Sophie, my dad held Caleb, and Chloe was squeezed between them in a big group hug. My dad turned to me, his voice thick with emotion. "Leo, son, just look at them. They're so big, so beautiful. For the children, you have to stay." My mom nodded enthusiastically. "He's right. What they did before was wrong. But things are different now. They have children. They'll change. Just stay and be a father." That was it. The last of my hope evaporated. The betrayal of your own parents is the deepest cut of all. In the end, I agreed. I looked at the sisters. The manic, obsessive energy seemed to have genuinely softened, replaced by something resembling maternal instinct. They no longer looked like they were seconds away from dragging me into a cellar. For the kids, I would start my new life as a captive stay-at-home dad. At least it's better than a basement, I told myself. Food, shelter, a family, and no work. Wasn't this the ultimate form of the slacker life I'd always wanted? 07 a month went by peacefully. To my own surprise, I started to adapt to the life of a stay-at-home dad. My alarm clock was no longer a buzzing phone, but 3 tiny humans employing various wake-up tactics. Sometimes it was Chloe climbing onto my stomach and shouting, "Wake up, Daddy, the sun's gonna burn your butt." Other times it was Sophie sitting quietly by my bed and gently poking my cheek. Most often, it was Caleb, my little hellion, driving his toy monster truck directly across my face. My life was now completely filled by these 3 little troublemakers. Dressing them, feeding them, playing with them, reading them bedtime stories. Sophie was just like her mother, Victoria, quiet, reserved, and happiest when she was curled up next to me while I read to her. Chloe and Caleb were pure Scarlet, energetic, mischievous, and the official in-house demolition crew, finding new and creative ways to cause chaos every single day. I found myself falling more and more in love with them. The bond of blood, I discovered, was impossible to sever. I even started to enjoy the feeling of being completely trusted and depended on. Victoria and Scarlett kept their word. By day, they were powerhouse CEOs, managing their newly merged corporate empire with ruthless efficiency. By night, they came home right on time to have dinner with the children. Their attitude toward me had softened, too. Their eyes still held a watchfulness that kept me on edge, but the suffocating madness from before was gone. Of course, the drama was far from over. They would argue over whose child I was favoring on any given day. "Leo, you read Sophie 3 stories today and only told Chloe 1. You spent an hour building Legos with Caleb this afternoon and didn't even hug Sophie." Whenever this happened, my head would throb. I had to become a master diplomat, carefully ensuring that all parties received equal attention. I thought life might just continue like this, a delicate balance of chaos and calm, until the kids were grown. One evening, after putting the children to bed, I was sitting alone in the living room, lost in thought. My phone rang, an unknown international number. I hesitated, then answered. A voice I knew and missed dearly, tinged with a lazy, knowing smile, came through the speaker. It was my Aunt Miranda Shaw. Well, nephew, enjoying yourself back in the States? Guess you're not missing London too much, are you? My stomach dropped. I had a very bad feeling about this. I'm sending you a little gift. She'll be there in a day or two. Be ready to sign for it. And then she hung up. A gift. 2 days later, my bad feeling proved to be a prophecy. It was a beautiful afternoon. I was on the living room floor with the kids, building a magnificent Lego tower. Suddenly, the villa's ridiculously expensive, custom-made front door was open from the outside. No doorbell, no announcement. It just swung open. I snapped my head up, my heart skipping a beat. Standing in the doorway was my Aunt, Miranda. Sharp, beautiful, and impossibly cool. She wore a pair of oversized designer sunglasses and stood poised on 5-inch heels, surveying the room like a queen inspecting her domain. Behind her, a bouncing pink figure appeared. It was Tilly. The moment Tilly saw me, her face lit up like the 4th of July. She threw her little arms wide and sprinted toward me like a joyful pink butterfly. And she shouted, in perfect, crystal-clear English, "Daddy, I missed you so much. Why did you sneak back home without me?" Boom. My brain exploded. I instinctively caught Tilly as she launched herself into my arms, my panicked eyes fixed on my aunt, who was grinning like the Cheshire Cat. "Aunt Miranda, what are you doing here?" She slid off her sunglasses, revealing her sharp, intelligent eyes. She walked over, pinched Tilly's cheek, and said playfully, "Well now, Mr. Father of the Year, running out on your daughter like that. TSK tisk. She's been crying for her daddy every day. What the mother to do but bring her straight to the source. Daddy, Father of the Year, daughter." The words detonated in the quiet living room. From a foyer came the sharp click of heels on marble. Victoria and Scarlett were home from work. The soft expressions on their faces vanished the instant they saw Tilly in my arms and Miranda standing before me. Their faces became masks of pure, volcanic fury. Scarlett, true to form, reacted first. Like an enraged panther, she lunged forward, pointing a shaking finger at Tilly. "Leo, who is SHE?" she shrieked. It wasn't enough to have women on the side. You have a whole other family? A kid this old? Victoria's stare was even more terrifying than Scarlett's screaming. She didn't raise her voice. She just drilled her eyes into me, a look so cold it felt like it was skinning me alive. She bit off each word. "What did we do wrong that made you go find someone else?" I was holding Tilly, reeling from their accusations, completely unable to get a word in. Their rage had already shifted to its new target, my aunt. "You home-wrecking bitch!" Scarlett screamed, lunging to grab Miranda's hair. Victoria's face was stone as she reached out to shove her. I was horrified, unable to move fast enough to stop them. But my battle-hardened aunt simply sidestepped Scarlett's attack with effortless grace. Then, in a blur of motion, she shot her hands out, catching both sisters' wrists in an iron grip. Her movements were elegant and precise, and a smirk of pure contempt played on her lips. My, attacking an elder in broad daylight? Aunt Miranda tightened her grip. The sisters winced, their faces paling in pain. Then, she dropped the final bomb. "Also, I'd be careful if I were you. This house you're living in, and the one next door, they're both in my name." That one sentence stopped everything cold. Victoria and Scarlett froze. The manic rage on their faces morphed into stunned disbelief. I seized the opportunity. It's a misunderstanding. A total misunderstanding. I pointed at Miranda. "This is my aunt. My aunt." And I pointed at Tilly, who was still clinging to me. "And this is her adopted daughter. Not mine. She calls me Daddy out of habit." The realization that they'd made a colossal, embarrassing mistake slowly dawned on the sisters' faces. But their expressions remained thunderous, partly because they had just been so effortlessly handled by my aunt, and partly because the title aunt was infinitely more complicated to deal with than the other woman. Miranda, however, wasn't letting them off the hook. She released their wrists and crossed her arms, looking down at them imperiously. "So you tried to assault me? While living in my house?" She smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of her lips. "Fine. I want you both packed and gone by tomorrow morning." Yes, it was glorious. Absolutely glorious. This was the first time in years, since they had become the monsters they were, that I had seen Victoria and Scarlett Ashford completely and utterly defeated. In my world, they were the puppet masters, the absolute rulers. But in front of my aunt, they looked like two chastened schoolgirls caught cheating on a test. The words "gone by tomorrow" struck them right in their Achilles heel. If they moved out, they'd lose their prime surveillance post. That was a non-negotiable for them. And so, I witnessed a spectacle I never thought I would see in my lifetime. The proud, untouchable Ashford sisters began to grovel. Victoria, the Ice Queen CEO, who never bent for anyone, was the first to bow her head. She stepped forward and gave my aunt a small, respectful bow. "Ms. Shaw, my sincerest apologies. Scarlett and I were impulsive. It was a terrible misunderstanding." She even added, "To show our regret, please allow us to cover all of your expenses during your stay in the country." Scarlett immediately retracted her claws, her entire demeanor shifting. She put on a sweet, almost charming smile. She sidled up to my aunt, practically purring. "Aunt Miranda, please don't be angry. It's all Leo's fault for not introducing us sooner. You're so young and beautiful. I honestly thought you were his older girlfriend." The shamelessness was breathtaking. My aunt simply raised an eyebrow, unimpressed but clearly satisfied. She didn't mention them moving out again. That night, the entire power structure of our strange little world was turned upside down. My aunt's arrival was a paradigm shift. I was no longer the isolated prisoner, and the sisters now had a formidable matriarchal figure they had to constantly appease. My status in the household, it seemed, had just gotten a major upgrade. I watched my aunt, who had claimed the main armchair in the living room and was casually sipping tea, and I felt a sense of security I hadn't known in years. My protector had arrived. In a desperate bid to repair their tarnished image with my aunt, and to secure their prime real estate for spying on me, Victoria and Scarlett launched a full-scale, win-over-the-elder campaign. The intensity of their efforts was a sight to behold. Victoria played to her strengths, throwing obscene amounts of money at the problem. Day 1, a complete set of haute couture jewelry arrived for my aunt, the diamonds so bright they hurt my eyes. Day 2, a dozen different ultra-luxury handbags were delivered, enough to create a colorful, ridiculously expensive feature wall. Day 3, she booked out the city's top Michelin-starred restaurant for a private dinner, just so my aunt could experience the local culture. Scarlett, on the other hand, took a different approach, focusing on companionship and entertainment. Knowing my aunt enjoyed having a good time, Scarlett became her personal social director. One day, she'd treat my aunt to a full day at an exclusive spa. The next, she'd whisk her away to a private hot springs resort in the mountains. The day after that, they'd be trying out some new, trendy virtual reality experience. She showered my aunt with compliments. "Aunt Miranda, you have such great taste. Aunt Miranda, you look amazing," until my aunt was practically beaming. And it wasn't just my aunt. Tilly became a primary target in their campaign. On Monday, Victoria had a life-sized, limited-edition Barbie dream castle delivered, so large it took up an entire room. On Tuesday, Scarlett rented out the entire Six Flags theme park for the day, just for Tilly. Roller coasters, carousels, whatever she wanted, as many times as she wanted. No lines. Tilly was being spoiled beyond belief by her two new, obscenely wealthy aunts. That night, clutching a new doll, she said to my aunt with wide, innocent eyes, "Mommy, those two ladies are so nice to me, even nicer than Daddy." My aunt just smiled and patted her on the head, a silent, victorious general. And I, in the middle of this all, was the biggest winner. I was left completely alone. My days were spent watching the three women in my life engage in a cold war for my affection. Their surveillance of me grew lax. Most of their energy was now dedicated to one-upping each other in the art of sucking up to my aunt. I was even granted the long-lost freedom to go for walks by myself. Okay, there was still a bodyguard trailing me from a discreet distance, but it was a level of autonomy I hadn't dared to dream of. But beneath the veneer of harmony, A deeper game was being played. I knew the sisters were only doing this to tighten their ultimate control over me. And my aunt knew it too. She was expertly using their desperation to carve out more space, more power, and more freedom for me. My aunt was my hero. The late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the living room. I was sprawled on the sofa, soaking in a rare moment of peace. My two biological daughters, Sophie and Chloe, were curled up against me on either side like a pair of kittens. I held a book of fairy tales, reading the story of Snow White in what I hoped was a soothing, fatherly voice. And finally, the prince kissed the princess, and she woke up. Sophie tilted her head back and whispered, "Daddy, does a kiss really wake you up?" On my other side, Chloe wrinkled her nose. "That prince is dumb. Why didn't he just carry her home first?" This, I thought, was what peace felt like. Just as I was about to answer them, the front door opened. Victoria and Scarlett were home. They saw the cozy scene and stopped for a second. Then, they both strode forward, each scooping up her respective daughter and pulling her away from me. In unison, with a clear note of warning, they told their daughters, "Don't cling to your father like that. He doesn't like it." Sophie and Chloe both looked crestfallen. Then, they turned their attention back to me. Scarlett pointed to Caleb, who was playing with his blocks on the floor a few feet away. "Your son is over there. Go get him yourself." The lines were still drawn. "This is my daughter. That is your son." Before I could even move, a pink blur shot across the room. Tilly, like a tiny, adorable missile, launched herself into my lap, perfectly filling the two empty spots. She wrapped her arms around my neck, planted a loud, smacking kiss on my cheek, and announced triumphantly to the room, "Daddy's lap is empty now, so I'm here." The air in the living room turned to ice. Victoria and Scarlett stared, their faces a perfect picture of my territory has been invaded. Scarlett found her voice first. She spoke to Tilly, her tone clipped and harsh. "Your daddy hates it when people sit in his lap. You should get down." Tilly just hugged my neck tighter, retorting with the unshakable logic of a child. "Nah, when we were in London, Daddy said his favorite thing in the whole world was me sitting in his lap." With that, the sisters' faces grew even darker. At that moment, Aunt Miranda descended the staircase like the queen she was. She walked over, plucked Tilly from my lap and into her own arms, and said with mock severity, "Tilly, don't be naughty. That's no way to behave. You'll make your aunts angry, and then they'll have to spank you." But Tilly, utterly confident, just hugged her mother's neck and shot a smug look at the Ashford sisters. "Don't worry, Mommy," she declared loudly. "My two aunts are super nice to me. They would never, ever do that." I looked at Tilly's triumphant little face. I looked at the sisters, their expressions a colorful, complicated mess of fury and restraint. And I looked at my aunt, my brilliant Machiavellian aunt, who was enjoying the show she had orchestrated. A helpless smile spread across my face. Run? Who was I kidding? This was my life now.